Hi, how are you going? Hope you're having a fun, festive season thus far. You've tuned into Extra Healthy-ish, your podcast from Body+Soul. I'm your host, Felicity Harley. To celebrate 2021, we're giving you, our dear listeners, our top 10 most listened to Extra Healthy-ish episodes. Now, sex, anything to do with sex always goes well. You seem to love that. The episodes get downloaded. But this one we're rerunning today is about relationships. It went gangbusters. I'm speaking with psychotherapist and couples counsellor Lissy Abrahams, and she talks through her top 5 tips for improving communication in any relationship. Lissy, thank you so much for coming on Extra Healthy-ish. Now, how are you staying extra healthy-ish? You're in lockdown in Sydney. What are you doing right now?
I am. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here. Well, I'm a bit of a creature of routine these days, and that's the way that I found that my body responds best to life is when I look after myself in terms of sticking to my exercise regime. I do that on Zoom, so I get a bit of a community around that in my training group. I also eat pretty healthily. I must say that during COVID, there's a lot more COVID chips coming out. We do little runs to the shops to get the COVID chips. But besides that, I really do try and look after what I eat, and that's a big one for me. And I guess the other way that I really do is I get out quite a lot. I've got dogs and I love getting them out to meet other people's dogs, and I get on the ground with them and play with them. They're so present. They don't care about COVID. They don't care about this world we're in at the moment. They're just in the present, and I love joining them in that space.
Yeah, so I love that. The fundamentals.
Yeah,
now, today I want to chat through, you've got 5 awesome tips for improving communication in a relationship, and you've got an ebook. I'll put all the links in the show notes. There's some really great advice in there, listeners. So let's start with listening. It's what we finished when we talked about healthy-ish. Listening, it's so important, yet it is so hard to do, particularly when you're in a heated discussion or argument. Why do we find it so hard to listen to not just each other in a relationship, but lots of other people in conversations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We find it really difficult because we're so wedded to our own way that the world looks. So we have an image of the world that it should look a particular way, and we create rules around it. And we don't like it when people's view of the world doesn't adhere to our own viewpoint, and we can have a lot to say about that when they don't. And especially at this time, I'm seeing on Facebook friends dropping out because of their decision to vax or not vax. We don't like other people's viewpoints when they conflict with us, and we can get pretty annoyed about this. The cancel culture is a huge example of this at the moment, and it's another one. We saw it in America with the election with Trump, and families falling apart because of how they viewed that situation. So we can't listen because we've got block up. We don't want people in our vicinity who are different from us. We're no longer open to other minds. We like the echo chamber that just confirms our view of the world. It's not very healthy to do that, and it's really important to keep opening ourselves up so that we're not, so that we keep getting new information and tolerating other perspectives. It's really important. We can't listen when we're worked up.
That term echo chamber. We do. It's the echo chamber. You just choose what you want to listen to. How can we become better listeners, or to our partners and to other people, and I suppose listen to those things that we might fundamentally disagree with?
Yeah, fantastic. I think everyone should be doing this. It's an amazing question to ask here, because I think our world needs it more than ever. One of the things I try and remind myself, because we all struggle with this, is to drop myself when I'm listening to somebody. So I actually say, drop me, drop. I'm not the important one here. I'm listening to someone, because to be a really good listener, we have to get in sync with somebody. And research has shown that our brain waves, when we connect and we're trying to understand someone, they actually join up. So we are in sync with them within the brainwave sort of department as well. So what happens is, if we want to be better listeners, we have to stop being distracted. We have to stop looking at our watches or iPhones and tapping and looking for someone over there who's more interesting, or washing that has to get done, and just to give our focus to try to get in sync so that we can just get to somebody. The purpose of listening is actually just understanding. That's all it is. It's not pushing someone in a direction. So if we drop ourselves, we don't have to maneuver somebody to be where we want them to be. We're just staying open, being receptive to where they are. Doesn't mean we agree, but it means we can let their thoughts sit inside our mind without having to shut them down and switch them off and get irate because they're not where we want them to be with our view of the world.
And actually, I find sometimes when you truly listen is when you find the most interesting things out about people, don't you? When you just kind of, you know, sometimes when you say, okay, I'm really going to focus on this conversation, and then you actually find out things about people, even your partner, that you didn't even know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We can really love our partner when we listen to them. We so often think that we know them. And this kind of leads to a question of curiosity. We stop being curious about our partner all the time. Like, we just make assumptions that we know them. But when we really listen to them, we learn things. I don't know about you, Felicity, but I'm not the same person that I was when I met my partner. I have changed. Life changes us, doesn't it? Children changes us. Everything changes us through life. I'm not the same as I was at 25, 35, 45. I can keep going, but I won't. You're
not that, eh? No, I was thinking you were in your 30s.
Oh, I love you even more. So we have to, when we do that, it's very intimate when we get to know somebody and allow them the space to speak about them and where they're up to now, and allow people to change and our view of them to change.
I mean, you are big on curiosity. You talk about this in your book. How can we... I mean, we do become less curious, right? We just do. When you meet someone, you just want to know everything, and you just want to eat them all up, and just want to know you. But then as time rolls on, so how can we remain curious? Is it just about asking questions?
It's about, asking a particular kind of question is really important. It's one where we're not making assumptions, but we're staying open to where they are. But if you think of it like this, all of us have our own private self that we don't always give over to our partner. And when we meet our partner at the beginning, we're much more willing to share that private part of ourselves. And we kind of fall in love with that vulnerability and ability to share that, the fragility and the strengths. And we just love all these different bits. But over time, with the assumptions we make, we don't really care that much. And if we don't care, we don't get that intimacy together, but we still have that private self that we're not sharing. We don't lose that part. It's still there, how we feel about certain things, but we don't share it all, and we don't sort of trust the space to give it all over anymore. So I think if we want that intimacy with our partner, and intimacy starts in the mind, it's how do we open up these parts of ourselves with our partner, and like I was saying, we change over time, to allow those changes to become part of what we talk about together, so that we don't have to keep so much in our private self.
We will continue the chat after this quick break. What about if our partner has a different perspective? Let's take the vax example because it's so relevant right now. You are pro-vax, and then they are sitting on the fence, or they're kind of reading more and more on social media that you shouldn't get vaxxed, and which, it's total BS in my eyes. But anyway, we won't go there. How can you agree to disagree? I mean, how can you get better at tolerating the other person's perspective?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It is such an important one. When we meet our partner, we don't know them. They're a stranger to us often, but we don't know them, and we allow them to have their own perspective. Over time, we seem to want them to share our worldview. It's really important to remember that they have their own minds, their own wishes and desires and hopes for being in life that they brought into this relationship, but they also have today. If we can't tolerate their perspective, we're going to actually see them as a threat to us. So this agreeing to disagree is really important to get into a position we can really do that. It's about respecting that they're actually a different person from us, that they're a whole person, and they weren't put on this earth to join us in our own minds, even though we'd love that. It's not why they're here, and it's not why we're in this relationship. So it is so important to agree to disagree, and to be able to tolerate that difference where their ideas can sit in our minds and our ideas can sit in theirs without feeling like a threat. Because research has shown I think it was the Southern Californian University, that they hooked up wires on students, psych students. It's always psych students.
They're always suckers.
Yeah. And they had opposing political views. And so this is about tolerating different viewpoints. What they found was that these students, when they started talking about politics and their opposing viewpoints, their brains lit up in the same way as they would be lit up if they were being chased by a bear.
Wow.
So we can find someone's viewpoint so threatening that we can feel like our survival is at stake. We're going to fight or flight mode. So that's why we fight, when we don't really like someone else's perspective. So we can really experience our partner as a threat to us just because their mind is different. So with anti-vaxxers, if I can get back to your point, Felicity, with the vaxing or not to vax, if your partner doesn't want to vax or does want to, let them be them. They have to do them. They have to be their own self in this relationship. And you can go and get your shot if you want. You know, it's up. We've all got our own position. Don't assume you have to join into one merged position in a relationship.
What happens if they don't shut up about their position? Let's move away from anti-vax, but let's talk about Trump. That might be a better one. Yes, what happens if they said Trump had a rally recently? He's all back on the agenda. I mean, and what happens if they don't shut up? What is it? Just a matter of saying, I can't take it anymore? I mean, being upfront about how you feel?
I really think that's a great way of doing it, to just say to them, I understand that that's what's really important to you right now, but I feel like it's taking over the relationship and your mind. Do you think that when you're with me, we can talk about something else? That we can do something else together, or watch something else that's not about the latest YouTube Trump rally? Can we do it differently?
Yeah, so just a matter of asking, really. What about, one thing I suppose many of us in lockdown now, we're with each other all the time. There's probably judgment, nagging, niggling, annoying. How can we get better at, firstly stopping ourselves nitpicking our partners, and then how do we handle it if our partners are nitpicking at us?
Okay, so we're all in this for a while, this whole lockdown, but it goes beyond lockdown, doesn't it? It's about how do we view our partner and what we're actually doing together. We often can feel that our partner is ours to do that too. And I want to kind of step people back. This is my mission, actually. It's about understanding our egos, because nitpicking is saying there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with who you are today. You're not doing enough. You're not adhering to my view of the world in the way I want you to be. You're doing you, but I don't like it. Can you change? I want you to, and we're not doing it in a kind of clean way of relating and saying, listen, I'd love more help with this if you've got a moment. It's complaint, going over the line, chipping away. You're not quite up to scratch. So I want to sort of have people step back and look at the seriousness of how we relate to our partner and communicate and take responsibility for it, because we don't own them. These relationships are conditional. They are not unconditional. Children, we've got much more give in that system. With partners, there's only so much we or they will take. And I can say this because we know that the separation and divorce rate is 1 in 3. It's huge. That shows how these relationships are completely conditional at some level.
And they're so fragile, aren't they, in many ways?
Yes, they are. And that starts now. So it starts with nitpicking. It starts with our ego being tripped up. It starts with today. How do we treat them as someone that's still deserving of our respect? We wouldn't have done this to them at the beginning. And remember that we want to go on this journey with this person, that we don't own them and they don't own us, but we've chosen this journey together, and that we can actually make it so much better if we take responsibility for our ego, for our complaints, our blame, our judgment, all of it. We can take control of it through learning, through books and podcasts and online courses. There's so much we can do and actually make ourselves so much happier for it and the relationship.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And just lastly, if you are into this, if you say, well, I'm going to start, pulling myself up, I'm going to take a moment, I'm going to breathe before I react. And if you feel like you're the one doing, but they're not, how do you deal with that situation?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we can develop in one way and the other doesn't. So breathing's important, but I actually think it's important to let them know that their response is not creating psychological safety, because that's what we're talking about, how to keep a relationship in the psychologically safe zone. And so I would invite them. I would say, I can hear that there's something you're unhappy with. Would you like to talk to me in a way that doesn't trip up my ego? Because it's in their interest that they don't trip up my ego too. So we've all got a responsibility for how we are and how we behave toward our partner. So hopefully inviting a cleaner kind of way of relating in. at that point.
Lissy, thank you so much. Great tips. Thanks for coming on Extra Healthy-ish.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for listening to this episode of Extra Healthy-ish, the big sister podcast to the one called Just Healthy-ish. Of course, both podcasts are from Body and Soul. If you want more info from us, head to bodyandsoul.com.au. And remember, you can join the conversation via Body and Soul on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks again for tuning in and for joining us this year. And if you have a moment, we'd be so grateful if you could rate, review and subscribe to this podcast. Oh, and wishing you a very extra healthy-ish Christmas.